With Ether Drift coming out, we're getting some discard support, so it's finally time to build a discard deck. Not a Tiny Bones discard deck, we're discarding our own cards for value and graveyard synergies. And don't worry, we'll have a lot of card advantage in this deck. So first, we have cards that do something when we discard a card. Conspiracy Theorist, Containment Construct, and Oscar let us play cards we discarded, so we don't go down on cards when we discard cards, sort of like giving all our cards madness. Riel draws us cards equal to the number of cards we discard the first time each turn. NT Impulse draws us a card whenever we discard one or more cards. Whenever we discard a creature card, Hasher Tom makes a 4/4 copy of it if we pay 3 mana. Cryptcaller Chariot is also a new card from Ether Drift. It makes 2/2 zombies when we discard cards. And don't worry, I'll talk about how we discard cards later. Every time we discard a card, Captain Howler will give a creature +2/+0 and we draw a card when that creature connects. The Gigshrug monster draws us a card whenever a land is put into our graveyard from anywhere, which means if we discard a land, it'll draw us a card. Currency Converter makes a treasure if we discard a land and makes a 2/2 if we discard a non-land, but we need to tap it to use it, so we can only use it once every turn. Monument of Endurance lets us draw a card, make a treasure, or drain our opponents for 3 when we discard a card, but we can only choose one of each mode every turn. But the best one is Bone Miser. It makes 2 mana when we discard a land, makes a 2/2 zombie when we discard a creature, and draws us a card when we discard a non-creature non-land. And this will trigger for each card we discard every time we discard, no once per turn restrictions. Surely Badgersaur is similar. It gets a counter when we discard a creature, makes a treasure when we discard a land, and fights something when we discard a non-creature non-land. Now we need to discard cards. Decaying Time Loop is a 4 mana spell that discards our hand and draws us that many cards, but we can discard a land to recast it from our graveyard. It doesn't go to exile once it resolves, so we can recast it as many times as we want. Because we're discarding our hand, Bone Miser will make a bunch of tokens, a bunch of mana, and draw us a bunch of cards. Since we're drawing so many cards, we'll probably draw another land to recast Decaying Time Loop again with the mana from Bone Miser. But we need red mana, which can be made with Surely Badgersaur. We can do that for a 4 mana card like Decaying Time Loop or Surely Badgersaur by discarding Clutch of the Undercity. We can do that for Bone Miser by discarding Brainspoil. This interaction lets us go through our deck and get a ton of value. Even better if we have Shadow of the Grave. It returns all the cards we discarded this turn to our hand for 2 mana. Or Change the Fortune. It discards our hand and draws a card for each card we discarded this turn. Our commander will be Niv-Mizzet Supreme. It gives 2 color instants and sorceries in our graveyard jumpstart, which means we can discard a card to recast it from our graveyard, but it goes to exile after that, so we can only cast it 1 more time. So we play 2 color wheels to be kind of like Decaying Time Loop. So we have Whispering Madness, Heartwarming Redemption, Channeled Force, Pure Past the Veil, Sail into the West, and Ancient Excavation. They're all a little different, but they all let us discard a lot of cards and draw us a lot of cards. Thrilling Discovery and Tainted Indulgence are some other 2 color spells we play. Thrilling Discovery lets us discard 2 cards to draw 3 cards and gain 2 life, so it's like a mini wheel. Tainted Indulgence lets us draw 2 cards and we need to discard a card, unless we have 5 or more different mana values in our graveyard, which we have most of the time. We also play other wheels like Brass's Tunnel Grinder. It's a wheel that gets a counter on it at the end of turn if a permanent is put into our graveyard from anywhere, and it flips into a land that gives Cascade when we get 3 counters. We can sacrifice Magus of the Wheel for 2 mana to discard our hand and draw 7 new cards. We can sacrifice Magus of the Jar to get a new hand for 1 turn. We discard the new hand at our end step. These are super wheels on creatures that we can reanimate with Persist, Dread Return, Swarming Emergence, Reanimate, or Animate Dead once we used them. Swarming Emergence is also a 2 color spell that we can recast with Niv-Mizzet. We can cast Dread Return from our graveyard for free if we have 3 creatures to sacrifice. Merfolk Looter, Rona, and Thought Courier can tap to loot. The Great Door also taps to loot, but we can can also pay full mana to transform it if we have 4 or more permanent types in our graveyard. It flips into a land that taps for 1 mana for each permanent in our graveyard, which will be a lot since we're discarding so many cards. Ledger Shredder connives every time a player casts their second spell each turn. Conniving means we draw a card and discard a card, and it gets a +1/+1 counter on it if we discard a non-land card. This counts any player, including our opponents. Teferi is similar. It's a planeswalker that has a +1 to loot, but it says we can activate it on our opponent's turns too, giving us 4 activations every turn cycle. It also has a -3 to phase something out, and a -10 to get 2 extra turns. We can reach 11 loyalty in 2 turn cycles if we +1 every time. We can pay 1 tap Bog Witch and discard a card to make 3 mana. So Bog Witch is kind of making the cards in our hand dark rituals. But we also get the discard triggers. Scourge Familiar is a free discard outlet that lets us discard a card to make 1 black mana. Chainer lets us discard a card to cast a creature card from our graveyard, and gives them haste. 6 gives all our non-land permanents in our graveyard retrace, which means we can discard a land to recast them, which is kind of like Chainer. They both don't exile the cards we recast when they die, so we can recast them multiple times. Song of Creation is crazy. It lets us play an additional land each turn and draws us 2 cards every time we cast a spell, but we need to discard our hand at our end step. Fauna Shaman has a 1 mana activated ability that lets us discard a card to tutor for a creature. Survival of the Fittest is a better version of Fauna Shaman, but it's also $200, so we are not playing it in this deck. Change of Plans can protect our board and loot a bunch. Lethal Scheme is a free kill spell that lets us loot 4 times if we have 4 creatures to tap. Big Game Hunter and Dark Withering can kill a creature if we pay 1 mana when they get discarded. We can pay 1 mana when Obsessive Research is discarded to draw a card. We can discard Altanak for 2 mana to reanimate a land. We can cycle Street Wraith for 2 life. Most of the time our graveyard is very full, so Walking Closets / Forgotten Cellar is very good. It lets us play lands from our graveyard, and it could be a Yawgmoth's Will. We also play a Soul Ring, 2 2-mana rocks, and 36 lands plus a Rush of Inspiration, which can be played as a land or a draw 2 discard 1 spell. It's also a 2-color spell that we can recast with Niv-Mizzet. And that's the deck. Oh wait, I forgot we need to win the game. Magmaking Artillerist, Glint-Horn Buccaneer, Feast of Sanity, and Brallin all deal 1 damage to our opponents when we discard cards. Dream Holes would be really good in this deck. It lets players cast spells by discarding a card that's the same color instead of paying its mana cost. We love to discard cards, we would like to cast spells for free, and we have 2-color cards, but it's pretty expensive. The total cost of the deck, not including basic lands at the time of recording, is $121.76, which is more expensive compared to the other decks I made. Check them out if you liked this video.